to my weekly video blog from a very cold Markenfield. This week has been nice up until the last couple of days, and then the weather has finally changed and we're finally into what we should basically be into in November. To be fair, we've had a little bit of a what they call an Indian summer. It's not been hot, but it's been very dry and it's been very mild, and finally now we are getting some proper autumnal weather. Just two things to say before I go into this week's Getting to Know Me series, and that is, one, I can finally say that the filling that fell out during my Blackpool day trip is now fixed. I am glad to report that because it was done under a year, in fact it was only done about 9 months ago, in February in fact, I didn't need to pay for it or the initial appointment where they put the temporary one in, which is fine, but that has marred the last couple of weeks, which of course unfortunately were my fall holiday. My fall holiday is coming to its conclusion and I go back to work next week. So now, without further ado, let's move on to this week's Getting to Know Me. And if you recall last week, I had introduced you to the first season of my life, which was Ever Forth and Onwards. I'm looking at this not because I don't know, but because it has the actual dates, and I don't want to sort of be non-specific about it, I suppose. So I said that started 1987 and ended 1993. It is the longest season, the longest single season that has happened in my life. I said that there were two events and one major theme that we were going to cover, and I'm going to cover the first event today, and this is possibly the most important part of that season. You know, my parents were not brought up Christian, they were converts, and they managed also to help with the conversion of their parents. So by the time I was born, I was being brought up a Christian, although my parents were not brought up Christian themselves. It's probably fair to say I may not have ever become a Christian had I not been brought up in it. I think that when you're immersed in these things, there is, at least at that age, a certain amount of just believing what you're told. You know, even in the Jewish faith, the age of understanding doesn't happen until somebody is 13 years old. Until they're 13 years old, they cannot be particularly of any faith, because they don't know, they cannot choose for themselves what is right and what is wrong. And therefore, according to the Jewish faith, if anybody dies below 13, they're naturally saved anyway, because they're not in a situation where they can make a decision. Of course, in the Jewish faith, slightly different, because it's a case of deciding to be a Jew and following the law, not a case of choosing Christ and being saved. But the point is that people are not culpable until they are able to discern what is right and what is wrong. That age has generally been 13. Before then, if you're brought up Christian, what you're doing is you're living off the faith of your parents. You are being told what is right and what is wrong by your parents, and you are assuming that that is correct. Having said that, there will come a point in time before you are of an age where you can decide whether you believe that or not, where you actually make some sort of profession and say, look, I have heard what my parents have said and I believe it. And now 9 times out of 10 it's believed because it's been told by the parent, and that's perfectly all right, that's okay, but it is still a profession. The first profession that I have, the oldest record that I think I'm a Christian, regardless, is actually what I call the first testament. First testimony? Yes, first testimony. And testimony is basically a, a story about what God has done for somebody. So it's a profession, usually of faith, obviously, because if you're telling a story about what God has done for you, then it's obvious that you know, are believing in God and have ascribed what has happened to him. This is actually a photocopy. It isn't the original. The original, I don't know what happened to it. This is a photocopy that my parents made. And it's that is all it is, okay? It's a single sheet, you can see my terrible writing, a single sheet of A4. It's torn, it's got coffee stains on it, I don't know if you can see the coffee stain there. It is nothing more than a crinkly relic. But this is my first testimony, and what it basically says is it was an acceptance that I wanted to be a Christian, basically, and it was based around the fact that my mother got very upset when she used to have a wood carving, and it was a carving of a giant hand. And in that giant hand was a little boy. And I don't know if it was me or somebody else was playing around, and this wooden thing got broken, and several of the fingers of the hand came off. She was extremely upset by that, and you know, upset enough to leave the house and go for a nice long walk where she could calm down. And it was my father then that explained to me that meant quite a lot to her on a sort of religious level, and it was that night that I wrote this down. Now, testimony isn't really a testimony if it's not proclaimed in some way. I and my parents had settled in Swallowbeck, and there is a church, St George's Church, which is in Swallowbeck, which is the parish church, that I went to and was, you know, sort of brought up in, if you like. And I think the reason that this has been photocopied is because this is probably what I actually used to take with me when it was read out in church. I was very, very involved in the church in several ways. Obviously they had what they called a Sunday school, which was like sort of halfway. They would take the children out basically and you know, teach them stuff. But I did a lot of performance work, so there was a bit of singing, and some of that was solo singing. There was playing in the orchestra, the church orchestra, particularly around the festival, so Christmas, for example. So I was I wouldn't say a performer, but I was, people knew who I was in the church, and I wasn't sort of afraid to get up in front of a load of people and sort of read out, you know, and there's not much to it, but I kept this. I've kept this in a very special place. This is not in my archive with everything else. This is in a special place that is reserved for, you know, what I consider relics, to be honest. But that is when I would say I started being a Christian and living off my parents' faith. It's when, having been brought up a Christian, you could say, yes, my parents had some success in me saying, yeah, I wanted to be a Christian. It was 1989, I believe, yeah. So I was about 7 or 8 years old. Sorry, I'm a bit parched as well. This cough's got me down. So I've got a nice cup of tea to enjoy as well. The actual becoming a Christian in my own right, on my own faith, happened much, much later. And, you know, a lot of people, I suppose, would dismiss this as being, well, just proof of what I'd been brought up in. And maybe that's true. But for me, it was quite important. It was written down, it was read out in front of church, and I've always marked that as the very start of my Christian identity and my Christian life, no matter how much at that point it wasn't really my own. There have been 2 UFC events this week. One of them hasn't happened yet. We're still waiting for it. So you will see the fighter of the card for that is in the end credits, because I'm obviously stalling uploading this video blog until at least I know that. However, the other one that happened in Australia has already been and gone. For me, it's a difficult one, this, because the main event was not one that I was looking forward to, but one that turned out quite good. The main event was... Where are we? Oh yes, Michael Bisping. That was it. And Luke Rockhold. No, Michael Bisping hates everybody. Absolute hooligan. Blah, 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 blah. Giving it the mouth every single time. It really is becoming fast his only selling point. Chael Sonnen Mark II, perhaps, except without half the charisma. The good thing about this match was not only did Luke Rockhold win, he'd won the first round, he won in the second round, but he actually finished, and it wasn't with a knockout, it was with a submission, which was kind of nice, because it's always kind of more personal, I suppose, when it's a submission. The submission is where somebody has to consciously basically say that they, that's it. Whereas with a knockout or stuff like that, you can say, well, it is the person's fault, but it's sort of like it's a natural thing. They get hit too hard, they just sort of go out. It's not something that they control, whereas submission on the surface of it generally is. Obviously, you'd be stupid not to submit if you were going to face injury, but the point is that you still have that decision. So, under usual circumstances, I would give him the fighter of the card, but I changed my mind. I've watched quite a few of these, and the one that impressed me most, the one I enjoyed the most, was Jake Matthews versus Wagner Rocha. People will know that I have before supported Wagner Rocha, actually, but I was quite impressed with Jake Matthews. I think it's a bit controversial as to whether he won the first round or not. But certainly, with the second round, he got a submission too, and it was very. He really showed how quickly he can capitalise on stuff to do that. So I'm going to give him my fighter of the card. On we go to the birthdays. There aren't many birthdays this week, but many happy returns to all of those who do have a birthday. We've got John Humphreys, Steve Taylor, Hazel Smith and Carrie Sunderland. That appears to be all of it. So I hope they all have very happy birthdays and eat lots of cake.